Hello, hello, and how are you? Good to have you here. Really pleased to see you. Um, I'm just going to get my phone sorted out because I've been doing things on it. Um, I've been sorting out my office space, so hopefully soon-ish I'll be able to have a real background instead of just a fake one, which would be nice, wouldn't it? To actually feel like you're seeing me in my native habitat. Well, kind of natural habitat. Um, I'm not showing you my current natural habitat because it's rather full of stuff. And I suppose in some ways that is my natural habitat, but it's not really the habitat I want to be sharing with everybody. We are working on getting that fixed so it looks like a comfortable, pleasant library and office space. I just need to make sure my volume's turned down on my phone. That's it, that one's done. Just because if anything pops up really particularly noticeably on my phone to do with the stream, because the phone is in my line of sight, I'll possibly see it. Otherwise, I've got my other monitor still sitting on top of the replacement computer on the floor, right next to me, here at arm's length away. And so when you see me turn this way, that's because I'm looking across at that monitor, which has got the monitoring information, if you want to put it that way, on it, where I monitor how the actual stream is going, like the fact that at the moment the bit rate apparently is excellent. So that's good. It's healthy for a piece of silicon sending a bunch of bits of silicon and metal sending bits of data everywhere. So what are we up to, and who am I, and what's all this about in the first place? Hi, I'm Jev. I read old-fashioned children's stories, and I know some of you already know that, but some people are new here, so I'm just explaining to them. So you guys hold your horses. You know where we're going with this. Be patient. We'll get to the story and all the mistakes and everything else I make, which is, I think, why some people like to listen, because then we know that none of us are perfect. I'm very good at modelling that. So yes, for those who are new here, hi, I'm Jev. I read old-fashioned children's stories. I started off in our first round of lockdowns with COVID, when COVID outbreak was first happening in New Zealand. And I started with the Millie Molly Mandy stories by Joyce Lancaster Brisley, which are a lovely series of books, which each chapter is a little mini story. It's set before the First World War, I think. I'm not sure. The worries and troubles of the outside world at the time were not referred to in the story. About the nearest you get to that is that they go to the cinema in the next village across from them, or in town or something like that. And mother goes away for a holiday or something like that as well. So, and I was, after having finished, sorry, I just flicked a piece of hair into my eye. That's not good. After having finished those and thoroughly enjoying them, although each story is very short, I left it for a while and then realised there were a couple of stories I'd missed just because they weren't in the copies of the books that I managed to have at the time. Found them, finished reading the stories and putting the recordings up on YouTube, which was where some of you will be listening at the moment, and realised that I actually missed doing the story readings, and thought I need to actually find some books that I can continue to read to do more of that. And instead of doing it every day until we'd finished, which is what the Millie Molly Mandy ones effectively were when I first started, because they were such short sessions, we've changed it to be 3 days a week. New Zealand time, it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 3 p.m. Although if you come early, then you'll get the ads out of the way, which is quite nice for you to not have to watch the ads before you can actually listen to what's going on the stream. So just a few minutes before, and then any advertising will be out of the way. Technically, I'm an affiliate, which means that I should be able to offer you, if you subscribe, I should be able to offer you some emotes. In fact, actually, these days, I'm also meant to be able to give followers emotes to be able to use in my chat, but I haven't drawn them yet. That will be coming. That will happen. It's just not there yet. There's other things to do, like sorting out the space behind me so I have a proper library of my own, a proper reading corner. That would be good, wouldn't it? Somebody referred to it the other day as they could see me doing it in a setting a little bit like I don't know if it still is, an English children's program called Jackanory, which has somebody, for part of the program, has somebody sitting in a chair in a relaxed manner reading a story. And that's how they envisaged me doing this sort of thing. And I thought, yeah, that's a good thing to aim for. So I will continue aiming for that. It's given me a bit of a spur on to get things sorted out so I can actually have a proper space around me instead of the fake one that we currently got. Although today's one is relevant. It's the books you see behind me and that globe over there. That's from a photograph taken in Rudyard Kipling's study or library at the house that he lived in Sussex called Bateman's. It's a National Trust property. If you're in England, you can actually go and visit it. I don't know what their current rules are, but I'm pretty sure that you're still allowed to visit on certain days of the week as long as you comply with whatever their restrictions are. There you go. So you can go and see it too. So it was really intriguing actually going to this property, seeing the house, going through the house, but also seeing the landscape around it. If you go across the front lawn and carry on down the path, you get to the river, and the river, if you carry on alongside the river, along the footpath there, you get to the mill house and some more fields and so on, and you look from there up and across and you actually see the hillside that in the first of these books is referred to as Pook's Hill. It's got some woods on the back half of the hill and all this sort of stuff. And so Kipling was sitting in this room behind me, looking out the window, remembering the different parts of the property he was on, but also the landscape that was nearby, the little villages and farmlets and things like this, and describing them as part of his story. And that, I think, is a big part of what instigated or spurred him on to the idea of writing a fictional account of snippets of English history as if they were stories being told to imaginary children, imaginary as in they're in the book, they're not real life, as far as I know, as a way of helping people to actually understand little pieces of English history as if they were there watching it happen. And so these two children in the story, Dan and Una, actually meet this character called Puck, who is Puck of Pook's Hill, one of the old people, one of the people of the hills, the woods, I can't remember, fairy folk, who supposedly are no longer still in the English countryside at the time of the story writing. And he introduces them to the shadows of people who were in English history. Now, some of them in the story, some of the characters in the story that they meet were actually historic people. You can look at history books and find that they were real people. Some of the facts around them have been played with a little. Some of them, the information that Kipling shares was what was known to be fact at the time, but maybe slightly different to what it actually is in terms of how we might understand it these days. But it's just that sort of thing. Sorry, I'm just seeing if I can move that because there's something showing at the edge of my... I don't know why. No? Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm being distracted. By the way, I have ADHD, among other things. So I get lost on the page when I'm reading a story. Even to myself, I get lost. Or distracted by some piece of information. You will possibly learn a lot from listening to me reading stories, apart from just, oh, there's a funny person who lives in New Zealand who we can laugh at. Apart from that sort of learning, you may learn a lot of little snippets of information about things along the way. Because, as you can see from this grey hair here, I've had a reason... Sorry, more bits of hair on my eyelashes. That one's probably from the cat. Sorry. I've had a reasonable amount of life experience. And I've lived, even though I live in New Zealand and it's my home country, I have actually lived in England for 4 years. And because we were living over there and knew that it wasn't long term, it wasn't permanent, we made a lot of, we took a lot of time to actually go and have a look at the countryside around us, the historic places, to visit places like Bateman's, and all that sort of stuff. I've been in the mill house at Bateman's, all those sort of things. And also, I grew up living next door to my grandparents, more than one set of grandparents at different times, and they all felt very connected with their own backgrounds and their own past and their own history. Not in a, oh, it was better in the old days sort of thing, but just, oh, isn't it wonderful that we can do this now because we used to have to do it like that sort of thing. And they would explain it. And often we would still have around the place, like in the cowshed, which was just a storage shed by the time I came along, that some of the machinery from when they used to milk the cows and separate the cream from the milk part so the cream could be sent to Auckland to be made into butter, things like that, where most other people my age had never seen anything like that. They would go to museums and look at this stuff. I remember going to these museums and going like, huh, so that's just what we've got in the backyard. And so it was nice to see how it was meant to work, but none of it was unusual or interesting, wildly, excitingly different to normal for us in my family, and also others in my surroundings, because it's a rural community. Generally, there's a lot more sense of connection with the past. So I tend to speak a lot more about that sort of thing. And blether on, I'm sorry, I do. I talk way too long. So this introduction has been all of 10 minutes. Let's open the book up. Oh, and by the way, meet my first generation iPad mini. First generation, still going, not exactly strong, but still going. It takes a charge, it holds a charge, which is brilliant. I can go online to Project Gutenberg and download ebooks, public domain ebooks that I can read to you, which is how I do it with most of the time. Eventually, when I've got the rest of this space sorted out, I will unpack my book boxes, of which I have a number, and get books up onto shelves and things like that, and then I'll be able to read to you from physical books, not just ebooks. Physical books such as, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to reach something here behind me, such as this, Losing and Finding, or The Moonstone Ring, a book by Jenny Chappell. So as you can see, that's a rather old one. And that's the sort of books where, yes, when I was at school, I grew up reading the sort of books that everybody else read at school, but we had a lot of books like that sort of era when I was at home. And so I grew up with a lot of those. And most of the stories I read to you are old books that I have read myself, my parents have read, and also my grandparents have read, on both sides of the family. So it's a lovely way to have a sense of continuity for some of us. I'm just checking this. No, there's nothing weird going on at the moment. I just need to copy some information and paste it somewhere else so I can check it out later, in case there's something weird going on that I need to know about later. Sorry. Right. And we shall get on with our reading. I managed to actually get it unlocked. See? Right. Here we go. This is Rewards and Fairies by Rudyard Kipling. And we are, I think, nearly at the end of the book. I'll just have a quick look at... Ah, no. I hit the library button instead of the contents button to find out. Where are we? The Tree of Justice. I think we might be on the last reading. This section is called The Tree of Justice. And so that means that today will be the last reading from... Go back to the chapter. There we go. It has chapters, but then because of the arrangement of the book, they're not standard layout for chapters. So we have a chapter heading or a section heading. This one is called The Tree of Justice. Then we will have a poem, and then we will have a story, and then we will have another poem, and that will be the conclusion of that section. So here we go. The Tree of Justice. The Ballad of Minepit Shore. Remember, I found out for us last time what a shore was. I thought it was woods. No, I thought it was a hollow, like an old quarry or something. It turns out it's a small patch of woods in a space, like a hollow that has trees in it. That's a shore. And quite possibly if there's a field or a paddock that's called something or other shore, it's because at one stage it had a cluster of trees in it, and that was the defining thing about that paddock, so it was named after that. So here we go, the Ballad of Minepit Shore. About the time that taverns shut and men can buy no beer, two lads went up by the keeper's hut to steal Lord Pelham's deer. Night and the liquor was in their heads, they laughed and talked no bounds, till they waked the keepers on their beds, and the keepers loosed the hounds. They had killed a hart, they had killed a hind, ready to carry away, when they heard a whimper down the wind, and they heard a bloodhound bay. A hind and a hart, that's like, I think that's a male and a female deer. You can look those ones up and then type them into the chat if you wish. And then I can read that out to everybody else, just so we can be sure. They took and ran across the fern, their crossbows in their hand, till they met a man with a green lantern, that called and bade them stand. What are ye doing, O flesh and blood, then what's your foolish will, that you must break into Minepit Wood, and wake the folk of the hill? That's the fairy folk. Oh, we've broken to Lord Pelham's park and killed Lord Pelham's deer, and if you heard a little dog bark, you'll know why we come here. We ask you let us go our way as fast as we can flee, for if ever you heard a bloodhound bay, you'll know how pressed we be. Yeah, a bloodhound, if you just hear it and you've got no reason to be worried about it, sounds okay. It's a slightly odd sound. But if you know that it's trying to find you, the sound is a really creepy sound when they're barking, when they're winding, making their noises that they make. Because you know that they have your scent and they will track you, and they will not let go of that smell of where you are, where you have been, and they will find you. Yes, quite a fearful thing. Very effective dogs, bloodhounds. Lay your crossbows on the bank and drop the knife from your hand, and though the hounds are at your flank, I'll save you where you stand. They laid their crossbows on the bank, and they threw their knives in the wood, and the ground before them opened and sank, and saved them where they stood. Oh, what's the roaring in our ears that strikes us well nigh dumb? Oh, that is just how things appears, according as they come. What are the stars before our eyes that strike us well nigh blind? Oh, that is just how things arise, according as you find. And why's our bed so hard to the bones, excepting where it's cold? Oh, that's because it's precious stones, excepting where 'tis gold. So they're inside the hill. Think it over as you stand, for I tell you without fail, if you haven't got into fairyland, you're not in Lewis jail. All night long they thought of it, and come the dawn they saw they'd tumbled into a great old pit at the bottom of Minepit Shore. Probably the mine pit. That's why it's called that. And the keeper's hound had followed him close and broke her neck in the fall, because she was following the smell very strongly and not paying attention to where she stood. So they picked up their knives and their crossbows and buried the dog. That's all. But whether the man was a poacher too, or a Pharisee so bold, I reckon there's more things told than are true, and more things true than are told. So were they saved by one of the fairy folk in under the hill, or had they just fallen into a mine pit? And they were drunk, and so they had imagined it. The Tree of Justice. Here's today's story section. It was a warm, dark winter day with the southwest wind singing through Dallington Forest and the woods below the beacon. Shall I look this up? Yes, I shall. See if Dallington Forest is a real place. I shall open up my other browser window and go, go away. No, I don't want you. Maps. I sometimes already have this part open next to me, so I can get to it easily. Obviously I haven't this time. Darlington. Sorry, keyboard. I'm just going to move it. I've got two keyboards at the moment. It's a bit of a juggle. Darlington Forest. There's a place called Heathfield. Let's see. This appears to be Darlington Forest. Put my keyboard down and see if I can. Darlington Forest, Heathfield, Netherfield, Battle, Wadhurst, Stonegate, Rotherfield. I'm trying to see if there's anywhere that's familiar for our story. Okay, let's pull that back out, because then I might be able to show you on. Oh, that's why it's not doing that. Okay, no, it's a little bit hard to actually see the specific. It is so. The place in this story is a real place. It is a real forest, but it would have appeared different to what we would see it now. It's down in the South Downs, I think. Yeah, it would be the South Downs in Sussex. The Tree of Justice. It was a warm, dark winter day, with the southwest wind singing through Darlington Forest and the woods below the beacon. The children set out after dinner to find old Hobden, that's the woodsman who works in the area, who had a 3 months job in the rough at the back of Pounds Wood. So you'll have an area in England, you'll have an area that's called a forest. Some of it doesn't necessarily look like a forest. It will be open heathland and stuff like that. But the whole general area is called a forest because it's not highly developed. It's used for grazing, and there's game animals and birds and all this sort of stuff. And then you'll have areas within it, like a farm will have a name of farm, and then there'll be paddocks within a farm or fields within a farm, and each of those fields will have its own name. So I'm guessing that Pounds Wood is part of Darlington Forest, and it will be a particular set of trees in part of it. Talking about the rough at the back of Pounds Wood, rough would be possibly an area where they've cleared the trees at some stage, and it's been a regrowth of bracken, brambles, that's blackberry and things like that, and a whole lot of things like that. So it's rough ground, it's not grazing ground. Hobden had a 3 month job in the rough at the back of Pounds Wood. He had promised to get them a dormouse in its nest. A dormouse is a type of mouse that builds its nest on the stems of different plants. It's an outdoor mouse, it's not a house mouse. The bright leaf still clung to the beech coppice. Coppice is a type of coppice is something you do, but it's also a type of wood growth. Coppicing is where you grow trees in an area and you let them develop good root systems, and then you trim off a lot of the thin new growth and you use those poles for different woodworking purposes. So you would coppice hazels because you're going to use the hazel sticks or poles to make hurdles. Hurdles are like a solid fence section where it's woven with pieces of split hazelwood and in between verticals. And then you can take those and put those in different places to use as a temporary barrier. So old-fashioned farming, having coppiced woods, was actually a very useful thing because it supplied you with material that you could keep reusing. But also you could cut the wood and burn it to produce charcoal, and charcoal would mean that you could create a fire that burned hotter than just a normal wood fire, such as in a kitchen or in certain types of industry. And so coppicing was part of that. So you continue to still get useful wood growing from the same tree sources. It's not like you have to plant a new tree, because these roots from this tree will send up more shoots that you can then cut and use. Does that make sense? It's a very sensible system for having long-term wood availability. You can also use it for firewood supply. The bright leaves still clung to the beech coppice. The long chestnut leaves lay orange on the ground, and the rides were speckled with scarlet-lipped sprouting acorns. The rides are the long, clear stretches between sections in the woods. They worked their way by their own shortcuts to the edge of Pound's Wood and heard a horse's feet just as they came to the beach where Ridley the keeper hangs up the vermin. So often if you've got a problem with certain types of animals that you have shot or trapped, once you have caught some of them and they're dead, you hang them up, because the others of their kind don't like being around where there are dead ones of them themselves. And so it's a way to show them this is not a good place for you to be. It does kind of work, actually. Anyway, so that's where Ridley the keeper, the gamekeeper, hangs up the vermin. The poor little fluffy bodies dangled from the branches, some perfectly good, but most of them dried to twisted strips. They'd been there for a while. They'd dried out. 3 more owls, said Dan, counting. 2 stoats, 4 jays, and a kestrel. That's 10 since last week. Ridley's a beast. So they think that he's killing off more than he needs to. Now, in our day and age, a lot of those animals are either protected or threatened. Their numbers are down, mainly because their habitats have changed, because we have built so many houses and we've got so many busy roads and things like that, and there's so much farming going on, so the woods that they need are not there. In those days, because there were different other animals that you were wanting to encourage, or crops that you were wanting to encourage, you tended to keep those numbers of those creatures down a bit. They weren't at that stage, mainly at that stage, they were not under threat. There was still plenty of them because there was lots of food and stuff for them around. Anyway, in my time, this sort of tree bore heavier fruit. Sir Richard Dallingridge reined up his grey horse, Swallow, in the ride beside them. What play do you make? He asked. Nothing, sir. In other words, what game are you playing? So Sir Richard Dallingridge we've had before. And so he's one of the characters that Puck has introduced to the children. Nothing, sir. We're looking for old Hobden, Dan replied. He promised to get us a sleeper. A sleeper? A dormouse, do you say? Yes, a dormouse, sir. I understand. I passed a woodman on the low grounds. Come. Oh, that's a bit weird. Sorry, I'm just checking. I hope you're still there. Everything is pausing. I'm just going to wait for this to stop doing its weirdo thing. I'm back. I don't know how much of that you missed. That's back again, and it's working, and it says that the coverage is excellent, although in actual fact it did pause. So I'm guessing that it's excellent in terms of what Twitch is seeing, but my computer was hiccuping. I don't know. I will read the last couple of sentences again because I only just saw that was happening. Nothing, sir, the children are saying to Sir Richard Dallingridge. We're looking for old Hobden, Dan replied. He promised to get us a sleeper. A sleeper? A dormouse, do you say? Because he's from a time period that used different names for things. Yes, a dormouse, sir. I understand. I passed a woodman on the low grounds. Come. He wheeled up the ride again and pointed through an opening to the patch of beech stubs, chestnut, hazel, and birch that old Hobden would turn into firewood, hop poles, pea boughs, and house faggots before spring. The old man was as busy as a beaver. Now, a faggot is a bundle of firewood cut to a certain length and usually with a certain amount of wood in the bundle. That's where there is particular English food that's referred to as faggots, and it's like little logs, a little bit like potato croquettes, where it's a short stubby log that's crumbed and then cooked, or maybe not crumbed, and that's actually what the term faggot comes from. There you go. And let's not think about any other use of the word, because this is a family-friendly story reading. So those are all different woods that are used for firewood, hop poles. That's for growing hops on. You need really long poles to hold the wires for the hops to grow between them. And pea boughs. So you use the brushy twiggy ends to put between your next to your pea plants, so that they have something to hold on to, and they grow upwards, so you get lots of flowers. And then you get, this is not sweet peas, this is eating peas. You get lots of pea flowers, and then you get peas as a vegetable for eating. And peas as a vegetable are quite a useful one in the old days before refrigeration, because you could shell them out of their shells and then dry them and then reuse them when it's not pea season, which means that you get vegetables. And because they've been dried rather than cooked before you to preserve them, you have kept a lot more of the nutrition that they originally had. So here we go. The old man was as busy as a beaver. Something laughed beneath a thorn, that's a plant, and Puck stole out, his finger to his lip. Look, he whispered, along between the spindle trees. Ridley has been there this half hour. The children followed his point and saw Ridley, the keeper, in an old dry ditch, watching Hobden as a cat watches a mouse. "Ha!" cried Una. "Hobden always tends to his wires before breakfast. He puts his rabbits into the faggots he's allowed to take home. He'll tell us about them tomorrow." "We had the same breed in my day," Sir Richard replied, and moved off quietly, Puck at his bridle, the children on either side between the close-trimmed beech stuff. "What did you do to them?" said Dan as they repassed Ridley's terrible tree. "That," Sir Richard jerked his head towards the dangling owls. So I'm sorry, it's not quite as family friendly today, because it's to do with gamekeeping and animals. And we are going to brave it and read the story anyway. We might learn something useful. Don't forget that people in different time periods had a different attitude to lots of things. And it didn't mean that it's wrong, it's just wrong for when we are now, but it was part of keeping a balance for the lifestyle that they had back then. Not everything that we don't accept was wrong at the time. It was right for their time period, maybe. We'll see. It might be and it might not. We'll see how we go. "Not he," said Puck. "There was never enough brute Norman in you to hang a man for taking a buck. I cannot abide to hear their widows screech. But why am I on horseback while you are afoot?" He dismounted lightly, tapped Swallow on the chest so that the wise thing backed instead of turning in the narrow ride, and put himself at the head of the little procession. He walked as though all the woods belonged to him. "I have often told my friends," he went on, "that Red William the King was not the only Norman found dead in a forest while he hunted." "Do you mean William Rufus?" asked Dan. "Yes," said Puck, kicking a clump of red toadstools off a dead log. "Rufus means red-haired, from what I understand." So Dan has learnt a little bit of history at school, and so therefore when there's references to different people with different names, he often seems to have a little bit of an awareness of it, and this is filling in the picture for him. "For example, there was a knight new from Normandy," Sir Richard went on, "to whom Henry, our king, granted a manor in Kent, nearby. He chose to hang his forester's son the day before a deer hunt that he gave to pleasure the king. Not quite sure why he would have hung the forester's son. "Now, when would that be?" said Puck, and scratched an ear thoughtfully. "The summer of the year King Henry broke his brother, Robert of Normandy, at Tenchebrai fight. Our ships were even then at Pevensey loading for the war." "What happened to the knight?" said Dan. "They found him pinned to an ash, 3 arrows through his leather coat. I should have worn mail that day." "And did you see him all bloody?" Dan continued. "Nay, I was with d'Aquila at Pevensey, counting horseshoes and arrow sheaves and ale barrels into the holds of the ships. The army only waited for our king to lead them against Robert in Normandy, but he sent word to d'Aquila that he would hunt with him here before he set out for France." "Why did the king want to hunt so particularly?" Una demanded. If he'd gone straight to France after the Kentish knight was killed, men would have said he feared being slain like the knight. It was his duty to show himself debonair to his English people, as it was D'aQuila's duty to see that he took no harm while he did it. But it was a great burden. D'Aquila, Hugh, and I ceased work on the ships and scoured all the honour of the Eagle, all D'Aquila's land. Aquila means eagle, or something like that, to make a fit and above all a safe sport for our king. Look, the ride twisted and came out on the top of Pound's Hill Wood. Sir Richard, pointing to the swells of beautiful dappled Dallington that showed like a woodcock's breast up the valley. Ye know the forest, said he. So a woodcock's a particular type of bird. So he's talking about the shape of the chest on the particular type of bird. It has a very pleasant shape, this landscape, similar to it. You ought to see the bluebells there in spring, said Una. In other words, yes, they do know it. I have seen, said Sir Richard, gazing and stretching out his hand. Hugh's work and mine was first to move the deer gently from all parts into Dallington yonder, and there to hold them till the king came. Next we must choose some 300 beaters to drive the deer to the stands within bowshot of the king. Here was our trouble. In the melee of a deer drive, a Saxon peasant and a Norman king may come over close to each other. The conquered do not love their conquerors all at once. So we needed sure men of whom their village or kindred would answer in life, cattle, for whom their village or kindred would answer in life, cattle, and land if any harm would come to the king. Do you see? If one of the beaters shot the king, said Puck, Sir Richard wanted to be able to punish that man's village, then the village would take care to send a good man, because otherwise they would receive the punishment for him. So it was, but lest our work should be too easy, the king had done such a dread justice over at Salehurst for the killing of the Kentish knight, 26 men he hanged, as I heard, that our folk were half mad with fear before we began. It is easier to dig out a badger gone to earth than a Saxon gone dumb sullen. And atop of their misery, the old rumour waked that Harold the Saxon was alive and would bring them deliverance from us Normans. This has happened every autumn since Senlac fight. But King Harold was killed at Hastings, said Una. So it was said, and so it was believed by us Normans. But our Saxons always believed he would come again. That rumour did not make our work any more easy. Sir Richard strode on down the far slope of the wood, where the trees thin out. It was fascinating to watch how he managed his long spurs among the lumps of blackened ling. I'm used to living by the sea, and I know ling is a type of fish, and I don't think that's what he's referring to here. I think it's undergrowth of some sort. But we did it, he said. After all, a woman is as good as a man to beat the woods, and the mere word that deer are afoot makes cripples and crones young again. D'Aquila laughed when Hugh told him over the list of beaters. Half were women, and many of the rest were clerks, Saxon and Norman priests. Pen pushers, not the usual forest and field people. Hugh and I had not time to laugh for 8 days, till D'Aquila, as Lord of Pevensey, met our king and led him to the first shooting stand by the mill on the edge of the forest. Hugh and I, it was no work for hotheads or heavy hands, lay with our beaters on the skirts of Dallington to watch both them and the deer. When D'Aquila's great horn blew, we went forward, a line half a league long. Oh, to see the fat clerks, their gowns tucked up, puffing and roaring, and the sober millers dusting the undergrowth with their staves, and like as not, between them a Saxon wench, hand in hand with her man, shrilling like a kite as she ran and leaping high through the fern, all for joy of the sport. Ah, how, sa, how, ah, Puck bellowed without warning, and Swallow, that's the horse, bounded forward, ears cocked and nostrils cracking. Howl, lal, 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 la, hi, aye, Sir Richard answered in a high, clear shout. It won't sound quite like that in a hunting context. I'm just reading the words that are written on the page, sorry. The two voices joined in swooping circles of sound, and a heron rose out of a red osier bed below them. Osiers are a type of willow that are cut to use for weaving, to make things. There you go. Some more of your natural history for today. Circling as though he kept time to the outcry, this is the heron. Swallow quivered and swished his glorious tail. They stopped together on the same note. A hoarse shout answered them across the bare woods. "That's old Hobden," said Una. "Small blame to him. It is in his blood," said Puck. "Did your beaters cry so, Sir Richard?" "My faith, they forgot all else. Steady, Swallow, steady." They forgot where the king and his people waited to shoot. They followed the deer to the very edge of the open till the first flight of wild arrows from the stands flew fair over them. They got so caught up in the excitement. I cried, "Where shot? Where shot?" And a knot of young knights, new from Normandy, that had strayed away from the grandstand, turned about and in mere sport loosed off at our line, shouting, "Where's Senlac arrows? Where's Senlac arrows?" A jest, I grant you, but too sharp. One of our beaters answered in Saxon, "Where New Forest arrows? Where Red William's arrow?" So I judged it time to end the jests. And when the boys saw my old mail gown, for to shoot with strangers I count the same as war, they ceased shooting, so that was smoothed over. And we gave our beaters ale to wash down their anger. They were excusable. Well, they had sweated to show our guests good sport, and our reward was a flight of hunting arrows, which no man loves. And worse, a churl's jibe over hard-fought, fair-lost Hastings fight. So before the next beat, Hugh and I assembled and called the beaters over by name to steady them. The greater part we knew, but among the Netherfield men I saw an old man in the dress of a pilgrim. The clerk of Netherfield said he was well known by repute for 20 years as a witless man that journeyed without rest to all the shrines of England. The old man sits, Saxon fashion, head between fists. We Normans rest our chin on our left palm. We Normans sit like this. The Saxons sit like this. I don't know, just a habit, I suppose. "Who answers for him," said I, "if he fails in his duty? Who will pay his fine?" "Who will pay my fine?" said the pilgrim. "I have asked that of all the saints in England these 40 years, less 3 months and 9 days. They have not answered." When he lifted his thin face, I saw he was one-eyed and frail as a rushlight. That's a light made from rushes. "Nay, but father," said I, "to whom hast thou commended thyself?" Giving someone as a guarantee that you will keep the current situation safe. He shook his head, so I spoke in Saxon. "Whose man art thou?" "I think I have a writing from Rahir, the king's jester," said he after a while. "I am, as I suppose, Rahir's man." He pulled a writing from his scrip, and Hugh, coming up, read it. It set out that the pilgrim was Rahir's man, and that Rahir was the king's jester. There was Latin writ at the back. What a plague conjurations here," said Hugh, turning it over. "Pum cum sum ok. Magic?" "Black magic," said the clerk of Netherfield. He had been a monk at Battle. "They say Rahir is more of a priest than a fool, and more of a wizard than either. Here's Rahir's name writ, and there's Rahir's red cockscomb sign, drawn below for such as cannot read." So a man of position would have a symbol that he would mark on his documents, a little bit like using a sealing wax and a sealing ring to prove that it's from that person. He looked slyly at me. "Then read it," said I, "and show thy learning." He was a vain little man, and he gave it us after much mouthing. The charm, which I think is from Virgilius, the sorcerer, says, "When thou art once dead, and Minos, which is a heathen judge, has doomed thee, neither cunning nor speechcraft nor good works will restore thee." A terrible thing. It denies any mercy to a man's soul. Does it serve, said the pilgrim, plucking at Hugh's cloak. O man of the king's blood, does it cover me? Hugh was Earl of Godwin's blood, and all Sussex knew it, though no Saxon dared call him kingly in a Norman's hearing. There can be but one king. It serves, said Hugh, but the day will be long and hot. Better rest here. We go forward now. No, I will keep with thee, my kinsman, he answered like a child. He was indeed childish, though great age. The line had not moved a bowshot when d'Aquila's great horn blew for a halt, and soon young Fulk, our false Fulk's son, yes, the imp that lit the straw in Pevensey Castle, came thundering up at a woodway. And there's a reference here to look at the section called Old Men at Pevensey in Puck of Pook's Hill. So you can go and have a listen to the other stories in the other book. Uncle, said he, though he was a man grown, he called me uncle, those young Norman fools who shot at you this morn are saying that your beaters cried treason against the king. It has come to Harry's long ears, and he bids you give account of it. There are heavy fines in his eye, but I am with you to the hilt, uncle. When the boy had fled back, Hugh said to me, it was Rahere's witless man cried, where read William's arrow. I heard him, and so did the clerk of Netherfield. Then Rahere must answer to the king for his man, said I. Keep him by you till I send. And I hastened down. Then I've read that. The king was with d'Aquila in the grand stand above Wellinsford, down in the valley yonder. His court, knights and dames, lay glittering on the edge of the glade. I made my homage, and Henry took it coldly. How came your beaters to shout threats against me? Said he. The tale has grown, I answered. One old witless man cried out, where read William's arrow, when 2 young knights shot at our line. We had 2 beaters hit. I will do justice on that man, he answered. Who is his master? He is Rahere's man, said I. Rahere's, said Henry. Has my fool a fool? I heard the bells jingle at the back of the stand, and a red leg waved over it, then a black one. So, very slowly, Rahere, the king's jester, straddled the edge of the planks and looked down on us, rubbing his chin. Loose knit, with cropped hair, and a sad priest's face, under his cockscomb cap, that he would twist like a strip of wet leather, his eyes were hollow set. Nay, nay, brother, said he, if I suffer you to keep your fool, you must e'en suffer me to keep mine. This he delivered slowly into the king's angry face. My faith, a king's jester must be bolder than lions. Now we will judge the matter, said Rahere. Let these 2 brave knights go hang my fool, because he warned King Henry against running after Saxon deer through woods full of Saxons. Faith, brother, if thy brother, Red William, now among the saints, as we hope, had been timely warned against a certain arrow in New Forest, one fool of us 4 would not be crowned fool of England this morning. Therefore hang the fool's fool, knights. Mark the fool's cunning. Rahere had himself given us order to hang the man. No king dare confirm a fool's command to such a great baron as d'Aquila, and the helpless king knew it, because a fool's job was to entertain, and most of what he said was in jest, and so therefore it was not to be taken seriously. So if he told the king he should be taking that man's head off or hanging him or something like that, then that would not be a wise thing to do, because it's your fool, your jester, your entertainer telling you to do this. And so therefore the king is not going to do this. That is cunning. What? No hanging? Said Rahere after a silence. A God's gracious name, kill something then, go forward with the hunt. He splits his face ear to ear in a yawn like a fish pond. Henry, says he, the next time I sleep, do not pester me with thy fooleries. So he's calling the king the jester. Then he throws himself out of sight behind the back of the stand. I have seen courage with mirth in d'Aquila and Hugh, but stark, mad courage of Rahia's sort I had never even guessed at. "What did the king say?" said Dan. He had opened his mouth to speak when young Folk, who had come into the stand with us, laughed, and the boylike, once began, could not check himself. He kneeled on the instant for pardon, but fell sideways, crying, "His legs, oh, his long, waving red legs," as he went backward, because he had flipped backwards off the back wall of the stand. Like a storm breaking, our grave king laughed, stamped, and reeled with laughter till the stand shook. So, like a storm, the strange thing passed. He wiped his eyes and signed to D'Aquila to let the drive continue on. When the deer broke, we were pleased that the king shot from the shelter of the stand and did not ride out after the hunt beasts, as Red William would have done. Most vilely his knights and barons shot. D'Aquila kept me beside him, and I saw no more of Hugh till evening. We two had a little hut of boughs by the camp, where I went to wash me before the great supper, and in the dusk I heard Hugh on the couch. "Wearied, Hugh?" said I. "A little," he says. "I have driven Saxon deer all day for a Norman king, and there is enough of Earl Godwin's blood left in me to sicken at the work. Wait a while with the torch." I waited then, and I thought I heard him sob. In other words, don't come in with the light. I don't need you to see me like this. "Poor Hugh, was he so tired?" said Una. "Hobden says beating is hard work sometimes." "I think this tale is getting like the woods," said Dan, "darker and twistier every minute." Sir Richard had walked as he talked, and though the children thought they knew the woods well enough, they felt a little lost. "A dark tale enough," says Sir Richard, "but the end was not all black. When we had washed, we went to wait on the king at meat in the great pavilion. Just before the trumpets blew for the entry, all the guests upstanding, long Rahir comes posturing up to Hugh and strikes him with his bauble bladder. Yes, a jester used to have a stick with a string on the end which had an inflated bladder, like what we would call a balloon, tied to the end, and he would use this a little bit like a king would use a sceptre to indicate things grandly. Well, a jester would do it for the fun of it, and he would use it to whack people with the ball on the end. Sorry, I'm just going to have a little bit of my cold coffee. Not iced today because I don't have any milk. I have to get some tomorrow. Strikes Hugh with his bauble bladder. "Here's a heavy heart for a joyous meal," he says, "but each man must have his black hour, or where would be the merit of laughing? Take a fool's advice and sit it out with my man. I'll make a jest to excuse you to the king if he remembered to ask for you. That's more than I would do for Archbishop Anselm." So, Rahir, the jester, is saying, "Go and sit with my fool, my man." That's that Saxon, the old man who cried out, remember? "Go and sit with my man and I'll make excuses for you, but it will be acceptable excuses because I am the king's jester. And I wouldn't do this for anybody. I certainly wouldn't do it for Archbishop Anselm, who's somebody with a lot more status than you." Hugh looked at him heavy-eyed. "Rahir," said he, "the king's jester? Oh, saints, what punishment for my king!" And smites his hands together. Go fight it out in the dark," says Rahir, "and thy Saxon saints reward thee for thy pity to my fall." He pushed him from the pavilion, and Hugh lurched away like one drunk. "But why?" said Una. "I don't understand." "Ah, why indeed? Live you long enough, maiden, and you shall know the meaning of many whys." Sir Richard smiled. "I wondered too, but it was my duty to wait on the king at the high table in all that glitter and stir. So don't forget, this man is Norman, his friend Hugh is Saxon. And I'm pretty sure they were in the first book, Puck of Pook's Hill, I'm not sure. He spoke me his thanks for the sport I had helped show him." This is the king, had spoke me his thanks. "And he had learned from D'Aquila enough of my folk and my castle in Normandy to graciously feign that he knew and had loved my brother there." This also is a part of a king's work, being able to get the relevant information and share it conversationally and make the other person feel a little bit more important. Many great men sat at the high table, chosen by the king for their wits, not for their birth. I have forgotten their names and their faces. I only saw that one night. But Sir Richard turned in his stride. But Rahere, flaming in black and scarlet among our guests, the hollow of his dark cheek flushed with wine, long, laughing Rahere, and the stricken sadness of his face when he was not twisting it about. Rahere I shall never forget. At the king's outing, D'Aquila bade me follow him with his great bishops and 2 great barons to the little pavilion. We had devised jugglers and dancers for the count's sport, but Henry loved to talk gravely with grave men, and D'Aquila had told him of my travels to the world's end. We had a fire of apple wood, sweet as incense, and the curtains at the door being looped up, we could hear the music and see the lights shining on mail and dresses. Rahere lay behind the king's chair. The questions he darted forth at me were as shrewd as the flames. I was telling of our fight with the apes, as you call them, at the world's end. That's in my... There you go. It says here, see the Knights of the Joyous Venture in Puck of Pook's Hill. So he's now referencing other chapters and stories in his previous book. But where is the Saxon knight that went with you, said Henry. He must confirm these miracles. He is busy, said Rahere, confirming a new miracle. Enough miracles for today, said the king. Rahere, you have saved your long neck. Fetch the Saxon knight. Pest on it, said Rahere. Who would be a king's jester? I'll bring him, brother, if you'll see that none of your home-brewed bishops taste my wine while I'm away. So he jingled forth between the men-at-arms at the door. Henry had made many bishops in England without the Pope's leave. I know not the rights of the matter, but only Rahere dared jest about it. We waited on the king's next word. I think Rahere is jealous of you, said he, smiling to Nigel of Ely. He was one bishop, and William of Exeter the other. Well wast, the Saxons called him, laughed long. Rahere is a priest at heart. Shall I make him a bishop, D'Aquila? Says the king. There might be worse, said our Lord of Pevensey. Rahere would never do what Anselm has done. This Anselm, Archbishop of Canterbury, had gone off raging to the Pope at Rome because Henry would make bishops without his leave, because supposedly the Archbishop of Canterbury is the head of the church in England, and so therefore it needs to be run past him who are going to be the church officers. But the king is deciding who's going to be the church officers, and that's not what Anselm wants. So that's what that's about. Because Henry would make bishops without his leave either. I knew not the rights of it, but D'Aquila did, and the king laughed. Anselm means no harm. He should have been a monk, not a bishop, said the king. I'll never quarrel with Anselm or his pope till they quarrel with my England. If we can keep the king's peace till my son comes to rule, no man will lightly quarrel with our England. Amen, said D'Aquila, but the king's peace ends when the king dies. That is true. The king's peace dies with the king. The custom then is that all laws are outlaw, and men do what they will till the new king is chosen. I will amend that, said the king hotly. I will have it so that though king, son, and grandson were all slain in one day, still the king's peace should hold over all England. In other words, the rules he put in place should stay. What is a man that his mere death must upheave a people? We must have the law. Truth, said William of Exeter, but that he would have said to any word of the king. So he's a bit of a yes man, William of Exeter. The 2 great barons behind said nothing. This teaching was clean against their stomachs. For when the king's peace ends, the great barons go to war and increase their lands. At that instant we heard Rahere's voice returning in a scurril Saxon rhyme against William of Exeter. Well wist, where lay his fortune, when that he fawned on the king for his crozier. And amid our laughter he burst in with one arm round Hugh and one round the old Pilgrim of Netherfield. Is this Netherfield that's a place in Jane Austen's books? Netherfield? I wonder, is Netherfield a real place? You can look that up and tell us. Go on, write it in the chat, or write it, if you're watching this on YouTube, write it in the YouTube comments section. And by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, it would be really nice if you gave us a like, because then YouTube will actually start to show other people who are looking for stories our channel. Our being yours and mine and the rest of us who like listening to this sort of thing. It's not just mine. Not really. Anyway, so we're going to carry on. Netherfield, that's right. And one round the old Pilgrim of Netherfield, his arms, Rahia's arms. Here is your knight, brother, said he, and for the better disport of the company, here is my fool. Hold up, Saxon Samson, the gates of Gaza are clean carried away. Hugh broke loose, white and sick, and staggered to my side. The old man blinked upon the company. We looked at the king, but he smiled. Rahia promised he would show me some sport after supper to cover this morning's offence, said he to D'Aquila. So this is thy man, Rahia. Even so, said Rahia. My man he has been, and my protection he has taken, ever since I found him under the gallows at Stamford Bridge, telling the kites atop of it that he was Herald of England. There was a great silence upon these last strange words, and Hugh hid his face on my shoulder, woman fashion. It is most cruel true, he whispered to me. The old man proved it to me at the beat after you left, and again in our hut even now. It is Harold, my king. D'Aquila crept forward. He walked about the man and swallowed. Bones of the saints, said he, staring. Many a stray shot goes too well home, said Rahia. The old man flinched as at an arrow. Why do you hurt me still, he said in Saxon. It was on some bones of some saints that I promised I would give my England to the great Duke. He turns on us all, crying shrilly. Thanes, he had caught me at Rouen a lifetime ago. If I had not promised, I should have lain there all my life. What else could I have done? I have lain in a straight prison all my life, none the less. There is no need to throw stones at me. He guarded his face with his arms and shivered. Now his madness will strike him down, said Rahia. Cast out the evil spirit, one of you new bishops. Said William of Exeter, Harold was slain at Santlache fight. All the world knows it. Santlache fight is probably the one that we call the Battle of Hastings. There you go. Because if you look on the map, Hastings is actually not that close to the town, the village called Battle, which is the name of the place where the battle took place. It was named after the fight rather than the fight being named after it. There you go. I've been there, yes. And there was a girls' school there at the time. The abbey that was built, that William had built as a form of contrition for having done something quite nasty. The abbey was an abbey for a time, and then I think with Henry VIII and the dissolution of the monasteries, it became just an unconsecrated building, and then later on, when we were there, it was actually a school, which is wonderful that it's actually still in use, these buildings that have been added to and changed and so on. The sense of continuity is quite interesting over there. Right, I shall carry on reading the story. Cast out the evil spirit, one of you new bishops. He's a bit of a stirrer, is Rahia. Said William of Exeter, Harold was slain at Santlache fight. All the world knows it. I think this man must have forgotten, said Rahia. Be comforted, father. Thou wast well slain at Hastings 40 years ago. 40 years gone, less 3 months and 9 days. Tell the king. The man uncovered his face. I thought they would stone me, he said. I did not know I spoke before a king. He came to his full towering height. No mean man, but frail beyond belief. The king turned to the tables and held out his own cup of wine. The old man drank and beckoned behind him, and before all the Normans, my Hugh bore away the empty cup. Saxon fashion, upon the knee. So Hugh knelt down and received the cup from the old man. "It is Harold," said d'Aquila. "His own stiff-necked blood kneels to serve him." "Be it so," said Henry. "Sit then, thou that hast been Harold of England." The madman sat, and hard, dark Henry looked at him between half-shut eyes. We others stared like oxen, all but d'Aquila, who watched Rahere as I have seen him watch a far sail on the sea. The wine and the warmth cast the old man into a dream. His white head bowed, his hands hung. His eye indeed was opened, but his mind was shut. When he stretched his feet, they were scurfed and road-cut like a slave's. So he's been walking in bare feet. "Ah, Rahere," cried Hugh, "why hast thou shown him thus? Better have let him die than shame him and me." "Shame thee," said the king. "Would any baron of mine kneel to me if I were witless, discrowned and alone, and Harold had my throne?" "No," said Rahere, "I am the sole fool that might do it, brother, unless," he pointed at d'Aquila, whom he had only met that day, "yonder tough Norman crab kept me company. But, Sir Hugh, I did not mean to shame him. He hath been somewhat punished through, maybe, little faults of his own. Yet he lied to my father the Conqueror," said the king, and the old man flinched in his sleep. "Maybe," said Rahere, "but thy brother Robert, whose throat we purposed soon to slit with our own hands—" "Hut," said the king, laughing, "I'll keep Robert at my table for a life's guest when I catch him. Robert means no harm. It's all his cursed barons." There was a lot of infighting, even amongst the ones who were the conquering people. "None the less," said Rahere, "Robert may say that thou hast not always spoken the stark truth to him about England. Should I not hang too many men on that bough? I should not hang too many men on that bough, brother. And it is certain," said Hugh, "that," and he pointed to the old man, "Harold was forced to make his promise to the great Duke." "Very strongly forced," said d'Aquila. He had never any pride in Duke William's dealings with Harold before Hastings. Yet, as he had said, one cannot build a house all of straight sticks. We do these days, but not back then, because you used the curve of the timbers to help with the strength. "No matter how he was forced," said Henry, "England was promised to my father William by Edward the Confessor. Is it not so?" William of Exeter nodded. "Harold confirmed that promise to my father on the bones of the saints. Afterwards he broke his oath and would have taken England by the strong hand." "Oh, la, la!" Rahere rolled up his eyes like a girl. "Ah, that ever England should be taken by the strong hand. Seeing that Red William and Henry and after him had each in just that fashion snatched England from Robert of Normandy, we others knew not where to look. But d'Aquila saved us quickly. "Promise kept or promise broken," he said, "Harold came near enough to breaking us Normans at Senlac." "Was it so close a fight then?" said Henry. "A hair would have turned it either way," d'Aquila answered. "His house carles," that's the servants, "stood like rocks against rain. Where wast thou, Hugh, in it? Among Godwin's folk beneath the golden dragon, till your front gave back and we broke our ranks to follow," said Hugh. "But I bade you stand, I bade you stand. I knew it was all a deceit." Harold had waked and leaned forward as one crying from the grave. "Ah, now we see how the traitor himself was betrayed," said William of Exeter, and looked for a smile from the king. "I made thee bishop to preach at my bidding," said Henry, and turned to Harold. "Tell us here how thy people fought us," said he. "Their sons serve me now against my brother Robert." The old man shook his head cunningly. "Nah, nah, nah," he cried. "I know better. Every time I tell my tale, stone me. But, thanes, I will tell you a greater thing. Listen." He told us how many paces it was from some Saxon saint's shrine to another shrine, and how many more back to the abbey of the battle. "Ay," said he, "I have trodden it too often to be out even 10 paces. I move very swiftly. Harold of Norway knows that, and so does Tostig, my brother. They lie at ease at Stamford Bridge, and from Stamford Bridge to the Battle Abbey it is—" He muttered over many numbers and forgot us. "Ay," said D'Aquila, all in a muse, "that man broke Harold of Norway at Stamford Bridge, and came near to breaking us at Santlache, all within 1 month." "But how did he come alive from Santlache fight?" asked the king. "Ask him. Hast thou heard it, Rahia?" "Never. He says he had been stoned too often for telling the tale." He has been stoned too often for telling the tale, so he doesn't tell it any more. "But he can count you off Saxon and Norman shrines till daylight," said Rahia, and the old man nodded proudly. "My faith," said Henry after a while, "I think even my father, the great Duke, would pity if he could see him." "How if he does see?" said Rahia. Hugh covered his face with his sound hand. "Ah, why hast thou shamed him?" he cried again to Rahia. "No, no," says the old man, reaching to pluck at Rahia's cape. "I am Rahia's man. None stone me now," and he played with the bells on the scallops of it, on the hem of Rahia's cape. "How if he had been brought to me when you found him?" said the king to Rahia. "You would have held him prisoner again, as the great Duke did," Rahia answered. "True," said our king, "he is nothing except his name, yet that name might have been used by stronger men to trouble my England. Yes, I must have made him my life's guest, as I shall make Robert." "I knew it," said Rahia, "but while this man wandered mad by the wayside, none cared what he called himself." "I learned to cease talking before the stones flew," said the old man, and Hugh groaned. "Ye have heard," said Rahia, "witless, landless, nameless, and, but for my protection, masterless. He can still make shift to bide his doom under the open sky. Then wherefore didst thou bring him here? For a mock and a shame," cried Hugh, beside himself with woe. "A right mock and a just shame," said William of Exeter. He's trying to preach at them about his attitudes, obviously. "Not to me," said Nigel of Ely. "I see and I tremble, but I neither mock nor judge." Oh, now they're going to try and outdo each other as churchmen. "Well spoken, Ely." Rahia falls into the pure fool again. "I'll pray for thee when I turn monk. Thou hast given thy blessing on a war between two most Christian brothers." He meant the war forward twixt Henry and Robert of Normandy. "I charge you, brother," he says, wheeling on the king, "dost thou mock my fool?" The king shook his head, and so then did smooth William of Exeter. William is doing everything he thinks is going to please the king. Very obvious. "D'Aquila, dost thou mock him?" Rahia jingled from one to another, and the old man smiled. "By the bones of the saints, not I," said our Lord of Pevensey. "I know how doom's near he broke us at Santlache. Sir Hugh, you are excused the question, but you, valiant, loyal, honourable, and devout barons, lords of man's justice in your own bounds, do you mock my fool?" He shook his bauble in the very faces of those two barons whose names I have forgotten. "Na, na," they said, and waved him back foolishly enough. He hies him across to staring, nodding Harold, and speaks from behind his chair. "No man mocks thee. Who here judges this man? Henry of England, Nigel, D'Aquila? On your souls, swift with the answer," he cried. None answered. We were all, the king not least, overborne by that terrible scarlet and black wizard jester. "Well, for your souls," he said, wiping his brow. "Next, shrill like a woman, 'Oh, come to me!'" and Hugh ran forward to hold Harold that had slidden down in the chair. "Hearken," said Rahia, his arm round Harold's neck. "The king, his bishops, the knights, all the world's crazy chessboard, neither mock nor judge thee. Take that comfort with thee, Harold of England." Hugh heaved the old man up, and he smiled. Good comfort, said Harold. Tell me again. I have been somewhat punished. Rahia hallooed it once more into his ear as the head rolled. We heard him sigh, and Nigel of Ely stood forth, praying aloud. Out, I will have no Norman, Harold said as clearly as I speak now, and he refuged himself on Hugh's sound shoulder, and stretched out, and lay all still. Dead, said Una, turning up a white face in the dusk. That was his good fortune, to die in the king's presence and on the breast of the most gentlest, truest knight of his own house. Some of us envied him, said Sir Richard, and fell back to take Swallow's bridle. Turn left here, said Puck. Puck called ahead of them from under an oak. They ducked down a narrow path through a close ash plantation. Oak, ash. The children hurried forward, but cutting a corner, charged full breast into a thorn faggot that old Hobden was carrying home on his back. Oak, ash and thorn. My, said he, have you scratted your face, Miss Una? Sorry, it's all right, said Una, rubbing her nose. How many rabbits did you get today? That's tellins. The old man grinned as he rehoisted his faggot. I reckon Master Ridley he've got rheumatism along a lying in the dyke, I see, to see I didn't snap up any. Think of that now. So Hobden was taking his time, making it take a really long time. So Master Ridley had to wait in the ditch, in the damp, all that time. He jolly well knew he was there. Think of that now, he said. They laughed a good deal while he told them the tale. And just as he crawled away, I heard someone hollerin' to the hounds in our woods, said he. Didn't you hear? You must have been asleep, surely. Oh, what about the sleeper you promised to show us? Dan said. Eerie be, house and all. Hobden dived into the prickly heart of the faggot and took out a dormouse's wonderfully woven nest of grass and leaves. His blunt fingers parted it as if it had been precious lace, and tilting it forward, the last of the light showed the little red furry chap curled up inside, his tail between his eyes that were shut for their winter sleep. Let's take him home. Don't breathe on him, said Una. It'll make him warm and he'll wake up and die straight off, won't he, Hobby? That's a heap better by my reckoning than waking up and finding himself in a cage for life. No, we'll just lay him into the bottom of this hedge. That's just right. No more trouble for him till come spring. And now we'll go home. So, obviously, dormice, the reason they're probably called sleepers is because of the fact that they hibernate in their little houses, their little balls. I'm just going to see if I can find a picture of a dormouse and put it up for you to see. Sorry, I'm trying to type sideways. And not all of my keys are working when I'm expecting them to. And dormice, there was a dormouse in Alice in Wonderland. That was the one that kept getting, he was in the teapot or something, or was getting tea poured over him. There's a picture of a dormouse. Let's see if I can find a picture of a dormouse's nest. So I can find a link and show you. That would be good, wouldn't it? Nest. Oop, no, not Nessie, nest. Right, let's see. Apparently they often build their little nests in hazels. Didn't know that. This one's an illustration. Let's see if I can get a link for the picture. Copy image link. No. Copy link address. Oh. Bother. It's going to be a pain. How about you look one up? They're quite cute. They're little tiny mice that are all curled up, quite gingery red colour, and they hibernate by all curling up, and their tail, they're so curled around that their tail comes up across their face. It probably helps to keep their nose from getting too cold, and it helps to stop them freezing quite so much in wintertime because they hibernate then. And here's the poem at the end of the story, and also the end of the book. And it's called A Carol. Thank you for waiting patiently. Here we go. Oh, sorry, pardon me. I'm burping. Here we go. A Carol. Our Lord who did the ox command to kneel to Judah's king, he binds his frost upon the land to ripen it for spring. To ripen it for spring, good sirs, according to his word, which well must be as ye can see, and who shall judge the Lord? When we poor fenmen skate the ice or shiver on the wold, we hear the cry of a single tree that breaks her heart in the cold. That breaks her heart in the cold, good sirs, and rendereth by the board, which well must be as ye can see, and who shall judge the Lord? Her wood is crazed and little worth, excepting as to burn, that we may warm and make our mirth until the spring return. Until the spring return, good sirs, when people walk abroad, which well must be as ye can see, and who shall judge the Lord? God bless the master of this house and all that sleep therein, and guard the fens from pirate folk, and keep us all from sin, to walk in honesty, good sirs, of thought and deed and word, which shall befriend our latter end, and who shall judge the Lord? And that's the end. See? It says there, the end. That's the end of Rewards and Fairies. And yes, there's references in there, lots of things, to the other book. There's an interesting little footnote here, and I can't remember which chapter it was in. The old lady's prophecy is in a fair way come true. Oh, that's the one where they're on the ship and the lady is reading the guy's hand. The old lady's prophecy is in a fair way to come true, for when the Panama Canal is finished, one end of it will open into the very bay where Sir Francis Drake was buried. Then ships will be taken through the canal, and the road round Cape Horn, which Sir Francis opened, will be abandoned. So you can go back and have a listen to that one. And the reference here to the Lord that we were just finding out about in the last chapter, this is the Norman knight they met the year before in Puck of Books Hill. See the young men at the manor, the knights of the joyous venture, and old men at Pevensey in that book. So there you go. And that's the end of today's story reading. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this back to here. That's the end of today's story reading, and we will have a different story next time. So what will we have? I'm not sure. Shall I leave that as a surprise for you? That would be interesting, wouldn't it? I shall leave that as a surprise for you. We'll find out what it's going to be next time. Ooh. Is it going to be a story written by one of the authors we've already had, or is it going to be a new one from somebody else? Wait and see. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you haven't, oh well, go and listen to something else instead. Tough bickies. I don't really care if you enjoyed it. What are you doing here if you don't enjoy it? I hope you didn't mind too much my mistakes, my blunders, my asides, my ramblings. In fact, if it was me listening to somebody like this, I would probably find that as amusing as the actual stories. So it's quite good to be able to be real and for people to enjoy other people being real. I describe my stories as being less bedtime, less less audiobooks, more bedtime stories, where you get the kid that's nagging and interrupting and, Mum, what's that? And, Mum, he's kicking me, and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, that's much more like it. So anyway, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.